Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here is your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 4 episode in People in Fundraising. It is Friday, March 7th, 2025. I'm very excited today to talk with Chris Cannon, who I follow on LinkedIn. I know many in our audience do as well. And Chris is also my first guest representing Missouri. So wonderful for various reasons to have you on the program today, and I'm excited to chat with you, Chris.
Yeah, terrific. Tim, thanks for having me. Again, I'm Chris Cannon at Zuri Group. I'm our Chief Strategy Officer. So that's sort of one part helping with counsel in projects that are complicated across our client base, and one part industry, and particularly advancement services and technology industry direction, and what should our clients and others be thinking about the long term of how your data technology operations can help you raise more money and build better relationships. You can find all my information at zurigroup.com. That's Zuri group.com. And I'm heavily involved in LinkedIn and would love for folks to connect, and happy to participate there too. And said, thanks again for having me and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, my pleasure, Chris. Thank you. I'm excited to hear more about what you do at Zuri, how long you've been there. But before we get to that point, which we do with every guest, we start at the beginning, theoretically, at least in their career. And tell us, please, how you entered the development nonprofit space.
Sure. Yeah. And this is a fun thing, right? Like none of us, admitting, very few of us probably started thinking at
Right.
18, I'm going to get a degree and then I'm going to be the prospect researcher at the St. Louis Science Center, which is my path started in my 20s. I was a PhD candidate at the University of Kansas.
Hmm.
Political science was my passion. I love teaching. The publisher parish piece worried me a little bit.
Oh,
And I had a fellowship that ran out, and I needed to, was in writing my dissertation, writing in air quotes. I really never finished. Um, but I needed the real job. And just sort of by happenstance, I applied to the St. Louis Science Center as the manager of research and records. I didn't know what any of that really meant.
hmm.
And this was in a paper, right? The St. Louis Post-Dispatch, for those of you listening, newspapers were a thing that happened in the 1990s. Um, and funny enough, they had a typo in the ad. So it was, searching for a manager of research and records. And I had done as a grad student a ton of early days internet research, some pretty innovative analytics work, and I'd be happy to talk about that, but it's pretty off on a tangent. But I knew that I could figure that out. I felt confident in that. And they asked for experience in Fund Master. And
Hmm.
if you're familiar with Fund Master with a D, they were bought by Blackbaud, became part of the Razor's Edge. So
Hmm.
I went to the Washington University Library for the weekend to try to figure out what the heck is Fund Master.
Sure.
And there were no search engines at the time that were meaningful, and looking for that to
Yeah.
help. So you know, I show up to this meeting very confident in my abilities and said, I think that's a type, like that Fund Master doesn't exist. And they're like, well, no, it does. We own it. I'm like, well, you spelled it wrong. I think that's why I got the job. I was just, they wanted someone who's precise and someone who could go do research. And that's what I did. And I showed them the newspaper. So I
Hmm.
did that role for a year. It was amazing in that a lot of our colleagues, I think, find this. There's no real cap on your career trajectory, right?
Sure.
If you're an accountant, you get a CPA and then maybe you get a CFA, and there's a path. Here, within 3 or 4 months at the Science Center, I was participating in the APRA reconstitution of a Missouri, Kansas chapter.
Hmm.
Nobody told me I couldn't. I didn't know what I was doing any more than anybody else, but I had this interest and this desire. So I got
Yeah.
very involved in APRA, very involved in how to use the Razor's Edge, which we were converting from, for prospect development. That was my passion early days. And prospecting, and to this day, is still gets me excited about the business. And so about a year in, I took a job at the St. Louis Zoo and became eventually the director of development, but played every role you could imagine there in that 4 year window. Solicited big gifts and wrote grant proposals, but also entered gifts into the Razor's Edge and everything in between.
Yeah.
I really loved it, but the thing I was best at wasn't the frontline, solicitation per se. It was making the operation spin like a top. And so I moved from there to the St. Louis University advancement team, did some pretty interesting technical work around getting banners stood up. Kinterra Sphere, which is no more, is now no longer, but and then a few other things, Campus Call and some other tools in a very short period of time, functioning at least well enough. And then I joined the consulting ranks. I went to Benz Wiley Flessner in the 2000s, left there after about 8 years, 9 years, and went to Zuri, been there about 11 years. So
Okay.
my path, like many of us, was liberal arts grad, trying to figure out what to do. Absolutely. I left out an important bit was a few weeks into working at the science center, it is a free science center for the community. And
Mm,
I saw these kids hopping off a bus around lunchtime, and I just thought, well, this is pretty cool. Like those kids can go to this science center for free,
yeah.
really because of philanthropy. And
Cool.
the efficacy of the sector really sunk in for me immediately. So it was a job initially, but pretty quickly it became a vocational, how do we help these organizations across the country and the world help society become better? Which
Yeah.
is again, I don't know if that's why I get out of bed every day and I'm excited about the work I get to do because I
Totally.
know that it's helping our communities get smarter, healthier, having better lives, et cetera. So
Mm.
yeah, so that's my story.
I love that. I love how you encapsulated, that career trajectory and how you saw the very tangible link between those kids getting off the bus and going to this free science center, but then how that also influenced how you look at the work of philanthropy, making communities healthier, safer, all of that.
Yeah, it our sector really is a mostly unknown. Again, from an employee standpoint, most of us don't know that we're going to do this as a job
Yeah.
when we're younger. But then, you start to do it. I had a phone call today with a children's hospital. I had a phone call today with an academic medical center.
Yeah.
I was at a university yesterday. And these are all places that in their communities are incredible employers. They're making, new students turn into new faculty. They're, et cetera. Like
Yeah.
they're doing all these things, and it's an amazingly rich part of why society in America is, this great place that solves more problems than most because the nonprofit sector is an engine for a lot of that solution.
Yes, absolutely. And if you can tell us, Chris, a little bit, what would you like our audience to know about your work at Zuri Group and about Zuri Group itself, please?
Sure. So Zuri is a team of about 70 experts that only focus on advancement with an emphasis on advancement technology and operations. Uh, what I like to say is I'm the least technical person at Zuri, and I'm pretty technical relative to most of our counterparts. We've
Yeah.
got folks that, integrate tool sets like a Salesforce to pick another product that have never been done before. We just have a really deep technical bench. But it's also folks that know our team has a real focus on what is best practice, but then also what are the practices that are best.
Mm.
So we have an emphasis on what I call going from theory to reality, right?
Okay.
We have folks that can build that report. We have folks that can integrate those two data sets. We spend a lot of time implementing Salesforce or Blackbaud or other tool sets, replacing older databases and legacy systems. And so most of our emphasis these days is a combination of really high caliber advancement systems work or really complex digital work like
Mm.
online giving integrated with, a volunteer program in ways that are bespoke to our clients. And then lastly, we have this underlying theme of counsel and best practice. What should organizations think about doing with their data, their reporting, their technology, et cetera?
Oh, okay.
And so our future is focused on increasingly how to take the here's what you should do
Yeah.
to it actually works now. Press this button and you get that report. And for me, the efficacy of that in the consulting space, one of the reasons I joined Zuri was that the opportunity to have not just here's your report on what you should do, but we can help you do that and bring that to your gift officers
Yeah.
uh, when they're traveling, or all the things that become impediments to doing great fundraising work and engagement work. We have the ability to operationalize that, build it, make it function in ways that have been really super rewarding. The last thing I'll say about Zuri is we like to work with everybody in
Mhm.
everything. Like we don't care what the technology is, et cetera.
Yeah.
But we work with about our client base reflects about a nickel of every dollar raised in America right now. So our clients last year raised about $33 billion out of the, almost 600 billion raised. So
Wow.
we're super proud of the impact. We have nothing to do with a whole lot of that, right? Because we're just making databases work, et cetera.
Sure.
But we play this bit role or this, sometimes outsized role in helping our clients raise money with their technology and helping them build relationships with volunteers or what have you. So yeah, that's a little about Zuri Group. And if you ever, again, zurigroup.com is a good way to find more information.
Awesome. Thank you for that explanation. So Chris, in addition to your role at Zuri, and before we started recording, you mentioned that you were actually in Utah yesterday, flying back from seeing clients. You've been to all 50 states. You've authored and co-authored several books, including one that I was particularly interested in doing my own research for today. It's published in 2022 called Focused Fundraising: How to Raise Your Sites and Overcome Overload. And I'm really interested to hear how this book came about. And specifically, when you were talking about this book on LinkedIn, you mentioned that it's a resource for, quote, the tech tug, and not quote, sorry,
Yeah.
the sign constant craziness that we experience in advancement, close quote. So I'd love to give you a few minutes to talk about that,
Of
please.
course. Yeah, I think that was a real fortunate opportunity for me. My co-author, Michael Felberbaum, is at Yale. He and I had worked together in the 2010s from like 2015 or so until we still work with Yale today. But they had a technology challenge and we got to work together a lot and just really enjoyed each other. We just had a lot of time together on this project, but also
Yeah.
saw eye to eye on some things and just appreciated each other's perspectives. Michael is a yogi, mindfulness guy. Like he
Okay.
does that seriously and nearly professionally at Yale now. He's responsible for some of their onboarding and some other sort of employee wellness considerations around mindfulness.
Mm.
Um, so he's the real deal on that, and I'm not. I right now I probably have 400 things open in Outlook. Right, my brain is always cluttered, but I use operations and technology to try to channel all of that craziness. So we
Sure.
kind of came at this from two ends, and the book is effectively one part as an individual, how do you deal with the overload we feel? And I'll give a couple of examples. And then as an organization, how do you structure so that you can channel the energy to the smartest possible things? So
Mm.
the the uh, the tech tug notion was something of a problem. Years ago, I read a different book where I highlighted what I call the iPhone problem, which is for our offices, our colleagues, consumer experiences, they have an iPhone that if you asked it a certain question, it will tell you what's the nearest Vietnamese restaurant and how do I order food, and DoorDash will bring it to you, and you don't have to leave your couch.
Right.
You might not even have to type. You could talk, right? Because it's speech and text. And then you come into your office and it's like 1997, right?
Oh,
You don't always have many. Some shops have figured it out, but most don't. They don't have the investment levels. They don't have the tech, et cetera,
yeah.
to match that consumer experience. And so it creates this immediate challenge. Well, that tech tug is when if you hear a ding in a in an airport, you will see 80-90% of the people within hearing it look at their phone.
Yes.
Is this for me? Right? And there's a whole series of books that around the conditioning of, how social media is kind of driving our attention and so forth, monetizing and seeking attention. So the tech tug was partly just to say, how do you overcome the fact that when you hear your phone ding, you will get distracted, and it might mean you lose your thought, and that might mean you lose your email, and that might mean you forget to email somebody who might have been a donor or might have been a colleague
Right.
who needed to go to a meeting. So, and there's some strategies around that, right? So for my phone, for example, you have to be pretty special to get through during the day.
Yeah.
There are essentially four phone numbers that can get me during the day.
Hmm.
Then there's another 25 or 30 that in certain meeting times during the day, I might allow for these are my colleagues and team members on projects. Um, and then guess what? I can always respond later. And
Totally.
But it's a hard thing these days. I can always
It
respond later.
is.
It's like, oh, gotta respond. So the tech
Yeah.
tug piece, when you balance it with the constant craziness, what Michael and I found, the reason we wrote the book, frankly, is we really enjoyed each other's thinking and time. We would have these connect, we had a standing call to connect and just say, hey, how's family and how's work and what are you thinking? And we kept canceling it because we were too busy.
Oh,
And
goodness. Yeah.
so that constant craziness of like some other priority. Oh, and I'm like, well, Michael's a priority for me. I want to talk to, like, he's probably the person I want to talk to most today. I love talking, through his thinking and the types of ways he's solving problems. And between us, we have this kind of yin and yang approach. So that was it. The book really culminated from noticing all of these ways that individually and organizationally we're overcome with just way too many things to do, way too much digital distraction, et cetera. But also then not even being able to maintain our relationship.
Yeah.
And so we actually used the book as a way to really deepen that because we had to talk a lot as we
Right.
worked through chapters and so forth.
Oh, no, that's terrific. Thank you. Um, so speaking of, tech challenges and innovations, I have this question for you that I think, could be really interesting for our audience to get your response. So as you look at all of the innovations and changes in your 25 plus years in development, is there a particular practice or a tool that you have encountered along the way or you've thought about, perhaps brainstormed with colleagues that maybe, has not still been fully embraced or implemented, but could make a significant positive advancement for our industry?
Sure. Yeah, e- I am I'm a fundraising technology curmudgeon, which means I don't drink the Kool-Aid, I don't buy it often. I want to see results, I want to see behavioral change, not
Yeah.
just let's buy a new shiny tool. Um, which makes me a little boring in part of my answer, which is the first thing that I think more and some of my clients are there, some it's why they've hired us to get there, but too few of our organizations in this sector actually have the fundamentals down.
Mm,
I have a couple core question. What percentage of your board members' data are you 100% confident is 100% accurate? And
mm,
if your answer is I'm not sure, then let's go fix that first.
yeah.
And instead, what often happens is here's that new shiny thing that I heard about at the conference that we now have a contract for, and we have to integrate it into this other thing that we haven't gotten the fundamentals down yet for that.
Yes.
So I do start with this very boring approach, like what's the truth about your data? Do you know? Do you have good data metrics, et cetera? The thing that I think that can parlay into, and again, some organizations do this better than others, is an actually meaningfully persuasive set of dashboards, reports, whatever we want to call those, that actually shape and change behavior. So,
Okay.
in that prospect development world, the early days, right? I gave a lot of presentations for APRA and other things. I've had this slide, and you'd appreciate this, I think, based on your role. The opening slide for my presentations was often just a big old 95%, like a
Mm.
nine, a five, and a percent sign in 172 font, right? And I would ask, the unanswerable question because they don't know what I'm talking about yet, of what do you think what's 95%?
Yeah.
And for me, the 95%, then the message and lesson is it's behavior. Like you can
Mm,
have the best coding and structure and workflow and Kanban and email, triggers that give you a confetti once you solicit a gift. Terrific. Can you actually get your very best gift officer who's probably in principal giving, who probably gets a pass on doing some of those things, to do those things? And the
yeah.
answer is too frequently, no. They'll
Yeah.
play giving. Yeah, they're not in our system because dot, dot, dot. And so that
Yeah.
gets back to this fundamentals thing. So I think if we could persuade leadership, and I actually think about this as a paradigmatic shift in information delivery and consumption.
Mm,
If you can persuade them to tell you what information do you truly act on? When do you act on it? What do you need? And then build toward that deliverable as a report or dashboard, I think you can then change behaviors. And changing behaviors is the reason to do this, right? Or stopping a behavior that isn't being effective.
yeah.
So, as an example of a place that is doing this right, I won't mention the organization name, but there's a vice chancellor, known him for a long time. He's not a database guy, but
Mm,
he's got four dials and a dashboard guy.
okay.
And they're red, yellow, green light. And if it's green, he he gives people latitude to do their job. If it's red, he expects the leader of that to come talk to him and say, "Oh, here's what's going on." And then
Sure.
if he doesn't, he knows he's got, management and other things to do that day or week.
Mm.
So this person uses data to drive their behavior. And I wish I saw more of that. Instead,
Yeah.
it's, there's a little bit of like yeah, that's good, but I'm going to go with my gut. Every time I
Yeah.
hear I'm going to go with my gut, I think like a little dashboard fairy died, right? Like it would be nice if go with your gut because it's validated by the data,
Yes.
instead of, just being a little Wild West out here.
I just was making a note about, it's 95% is the behavior, but how can we get, for the data to drive our behavior?
Yeah.
Excellent
And,
point.
and so part of that behavior is the behavior of getting data into the system.
Yes.
So right now, I would submit that there's almost a uh, industry problem of cell phone data being unreplicated in databases of record.
Hmm.
So when I hear clients and colleagues say, well, yeah, I mean, I have my donor's cell phone. Great. I don't see it in our
Yeah.
database of
Yeah,
record.
totally.
And by the way, it is your donor because you're building that relationship, but it's the organization's data.
Yes.
And so how do so that's part of that 95%.
Totally.
And it's the vice chancellor, deciding to stop the phonathon because they can see the trajectory or start the phonathon back up because they see whatever those things are, that it's not just, well, let's see how it goes. It's the data are very clear and I trust the data and the data are complete. Those
Yeah.
are all they require some underlying behavioral pieces that are fundamentally useful. And I wish were fundamentally available for all the shops that I get to help.
Yeah.
But frankly, it's why I wind up being pretty busy because it's not, right? Like if everything were perfect, there wouldn't be much use for me.
Excellent. I enjoyed that part of the conversation, Chris. We have about 10 minutes left. I appreciate your time today so far. Um, and I want to get to this last question. Again, it's hearkening to a LinkedIn post of yours, which I enjoy reading them. I think you
Thank you.
have a
It's
great
good
way
to
of synthesizing, as we'll get to in the question, synthesizing outside content pieces to help you with whatever argument, whatever viewpoint you want to share yourself. And this one was great. And if you want to hold up the book that you showed me before we started
Yeah.
recording, this is the source. Yeah, so the Peloponnesian War by, help me with the name again, please.
Thucydides.
Thank you, Thucydides. Thank you. So just a few months ago, you posted on LinkedIn a quote from Thucydides that, quote, fortune goes to those best prepared, end quote. And in that post, you also noted that, quote, planning in 10-year cycles helps you, as does establishing focus on first principles. So I'm just curious, what might you feel comfortable, Chris, sharing about what you're planning for the next 10 years,
Sure.
getting us to 2035, and maybe this concept of first principles and what those may be for you.
Yeah, happy to. Um, the 10-year piece came about in part because I'd been at Zuri for about a decade.
Okay.
And often I'm thinking about at my previous employer. I was there for about 9 years and, getting close to 10. So I started to think about like, is this where I want to be? This was, a decade ago. Is this where I want to be, what I want to be doing? And the short answer was kind of. The efficacy of the work, I found that there was more theory and more here are recommendations than there were, and here are the solutions. And my
Yeah.
friend Liz is going to program that with you, and my friend
Yeah.
Kim is going to talk to your CIO. Like the deliverables leading to work or solutions that would help you with your data accuracy, your reporting, and that new, that information delivery system, et cetera. All those things were part of that rationale. So I was approaching my 10-year window with Zuri, and it's been on my mind. What's next? And
Yeah.
with Zuri and our client base, as I mentioned, that I couldn't be more proud of, and the work that we do and the expertise we have, 10 more years, right? If this were like an election cycle, like, 10 more years made 100% sense to me. But I
Yeah.
was thinking about, what don't we do that maybe we should?
Mm.
What do we do that maybe we shouldn't? There's this great book that maybe I can find on my called Quit. Um, and it's, effectively when do you leave something behind because it's not helping you? And that's hard to do because you've invested
Yeah.
time to make it exist and so forth. So those were all kind of in my, a few months worth of what's happening and what am I thinking? And so one of the reasons that I find this 10-year window beneficial is it really forces you to think about the efficacy of your choice long term. Could you go make more money in the short term doing something? Probably. Um, for me, that's not really the point of the way that I think. The
Yeah.
way that I've been thinking as a professional is how can I have the biggest impact on as many nonprofit organizations, helping as many human beings and trees and animals, and
Sure.
water and so forth. Um, and so it's, therefore double down on the base that's been built, et cetera, at Zuri has been the thinking. So from a first principles perspective, then we have a few at Zuri. So one is technology is a means to an end, right? Again, that's my fundraising tech curmudgeonness, that it's not a magic bullet. You have to get people to use it.
Yeah.
If you get both, if you get the new tech and the new behavior, those shops go raise more money. I have data to prove that.
Totally.
If you then take another first principle around, we help everybody with everything. Um, it's one of the reasons that I try to be well read around both our industry, but also how we might learn from others is, if all you do is pick the vendor implementation, you're showing up with a hammer and hoping the client has nails and maybe they need, screws and nuts and bolts, and maybe they don't even need wood, maybe they need metal, right? You, it gives us this chance to be very broad in how we solve problems, and therefore our solutions are often, we really do a ton of things no one's ever thought to do before,
Mm.
or someone has said, we talked to so and so, they said it's not possible.
Oh, yeah.
Give us a shot because I suspect that not possible is with the tools that were brought to bear. And if those tools aren't everything for everybody, then sure, yeah, maybe you limit yourself. There are a
Yeah.
few other kinds of first principles like that. We put our team members, um, we hold ourselves to a standard across the team that allows for us to really have adults and experts in the room at all time. And we do it in an affirming way. We don't have a burnout culture or anything. But I absolutely know that many of my colleagues are the single best person in the world
Mm.
at the thing that they're helping a client with. And that means for me that from a delegation standpoint or other things, I feel amazing to say, here's my friend Ellen. She's going to help you with X. And you will never need to talk to me again, probably, because Ellen's better at that thing than I am.
Yes.
Or it's Ken or Kate or Liz or Cody, Matthew, Matt, Terry, Christy. I mean, almost every one of our team members has had direct advancement experience. They have walked the walk, which
Yeah.
means now as team members, they just knock it out of the park all the time.
Mm. That's awesome. Yeah, and you mentioned the book Quit. So when I post this conversation, I can share a link to that as well. I always am interested to hear what thought leaders like yourself are reading. So that, what are you gleaning, and hey, how could I take something from these materials as well? So thank you for that shout out.
Sure. I have a couple others that because I'm thinking about this, working on a book number three with a couple of co-authors. It's really early stages, but we're looking at sort of the trajectory of charity and so forth. So I've been reading a couple things about the history of philanthropy. So I'm finding this, the Robert Reich book,
Oh yeah.
called Just Giving. It's interesting, right? His vantage point to me isn't, it's never really been a practitioner, so it's
Right.
little bit of a different approach. I also found this Olivier Zone's book called Philanthropy in America.
Oh, okay.
Super helpful, just fascinating to think, what was philanthropy like in the 1800s when, the Mellons and the Vanderbilts and others were coming up, as, essentially billionaire benefactors. What happened during the Roaring Twenties, and then with the fallout, the role between government and chartering charities back in the day.
Mm.
The Red Cross is an example of something that, not every, sorry, almost no charities are actually chartered by Congress, but some are. And
Mm.
most of those, it was to solve a problem that government didn't have budget or plan for at the time that needed to be solved.
Yeah.
Kind of fascinating. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
right now I'm pretty focused on making sure that I understand the the history of philanthropy. So
Yeah.
if you want to look at what's going to happen next, you probably should know what happened in the past, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Well, and that's a great concluding statement, Chris. I just feel like it's wonderful to hear what content you gravitate to that you then apply to your job at Zuri, to what you share with others on LinkedIn. So yes, please, in our audience, if you want to follow Chris Cannon on LinkedIn, please feel free. I enjoy your posts, and it's been a great conversation with you today, Chris.
Yeah, Tim, I look forward to it again. And next time we'll do it in the state of Utah,
Yes.
outside of the airport.
That sounds great. Is Utah the only state that you haven't left the airport?
It is. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, well,
crazy.
absolutely. We will do that.
So we'll do that sometime soon. I was there last night at midnight or whatever before
Wow.
my flight, and I'll be
Wow.
back. I'll let you know. I'll keep in touch. And thank you for this one for including me. I really appreciate it. I'm honored to be here. But also just the service you're providing to reference and ha help people see all these different perspectives about a very complicated industry that almost none of us knew about before the day we took our first job at it.
It's true. Thank you. I appreciate your kind compliments.
You bet.
And then your time today. And for our audience, you'll be able to find Chris Cannon's interview once it airs across various platforms. One is LinkedIn, which will have the link to the YouTube audio video component. Then Podbean and Spotify for the audio only, because some in my audience just want to hear the audio, and that's fine. And lastly, thanks to Luis Diaz and the Donor Participation Project, he is sponsoring my new website. Chris's interview will be on there, and you can find that at peopleinfundraising.wordifysites.com. And Chris, I'll share my details with you offline, and we'll plan for a Utah lunch or dinner sometime.
Sounds fantastic. All right.
Thank
Happy
you.
fundraising.
You as well. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.